With the robot starting to take shape, it's time to move on to the external robot assemblies. Moving on to the external cross-member assembly, you're going to need two of them. You're going to need two of the pillow bearing blocks as well as two of the inside corner brackets for each one, so 4 total. I'm going to start with this one, and we're just going to take this very similarly to the internal and put this flush. I'm just going to line these up, use the tool to help me a little bit, line it up. Again, we're going to bring it flush, so the ridge is a little proud, and just snug those up. And we do the same for the other side. This one doesn't need any extra screws inside like the previous ones did. And again, we're going to bring it about flush and then just snug up these nylock nuts. And then we're going to take our bearing pillow blocks and 90 degrees from the inside corner brackets, place them, put it about flush as well, and do the same thing on this side. Oh, this one's not liking me. So we're just going to rotate it a little bit, get it in there, get to the next one, get it in there, and then make it about flush. And snug these up. And we're just going to do that one more time. All right. And there we have our external frame member assembly. All right, so we're going to assemble our Planetary gearbox. We have our HD hex motor with a pinion pre-pressed on that is designed to work with the Planetary system. We have our motor mounting bracket that's going to go directly onto the motor, a 5-to-1 and a 4-to-1 Planetary cartridge, as well as the Planetary output. We're going to need the two 8mm long button head screws. These are very specific for use in this, as well as our socket cap screws. These are 30mm long based on the amount of stages we have. This is the second longest screw that comes in the pack. There is a longer one in case you end up going to 3 stages, but we're just using 2 here for our drive, so you'll need the 30mm long ones. So we're going to go ahead and take our motor and take basically our mounting bracket. This is going to go onto the motor with these pockets facing up. The pockets are where the screws are going to actually live. Now, the center here has a bit of a boss on the motor. You can see that little section that's raised up. So that'll help line this plate up. And then you just need to rotate it so that the screw holes are there. And again, these are little button heads. And you might be able to start them by hand. But if you can't, you're going to take your 2mm Allen wrench or hex wrench, and you can put them in there and just get them started. And we can do the other side as well. And I'm just going to kind of lay this one in there, then take the hex cap, take the Allen key rather, get it in there. And again, I can back it off a little bit to help seat the threads, and then go to rotate it in. Didn't quite get there. There we go. And we're just going to spin this on. And these can be a little tighter. So we're using this little ball end, but then we can come in and just give this a little bit of a tightness to it. Doesn't have to be super tight, but you don't want those coming out too easily anyway. So now that that bracket's on, or that mounting plate to the motor is, we're now going to go to our stages. Generally speaking, you're always going to use your highest stage first. In this case, we're using a 5-to-1. To get this on, you're going to line this up. So this pinion is designed to go into these gears here and line up. And when you go to place it on, you can rotate it, but also if you put a little pressure and hold this, this will keep this section from rotating, because this will want to rotate on you as you're bringing this in to rotate here. So you hold this very lightly, you bring this in, and then you're just going to rotate it until it finds its way in. And you can give it a little jiggle and it'll go in. And once it's in, you can now rotate this, and this will have little steps in here that'll make it kind of line up and lock in place. And you can position this in a couple different locations if you want to. So I can pull this out and show you that it'll lock into here as well. And I'm going to do this so it lines up with all the text. It's also a great idea to line up your next reductions, so it's really easy at a quick glance to see all the different stages you have on here. So we have a 5-to-1. We're now reducing this motor's RPM 5-to-1, and then we're going to go to a 4-to-1. And this is going to multiply, meaning we're having a 20-to-1 reduction on this. So again, I'm holding this, bringing this in, and finding its spot. Get a little bit of a jiggle. There we go. And once it's in, I'm going to rotate it so it's the same spot as the previous one, and it locked in there, and all the text lines up, which is really easy to read. And these are pre-greased, so you don't have to worry about greasing them, but that can leave a little bit of grease on your hands. So you might be good to have a little bit of a towel around to wipe that grease off your hands. You want the grease inside, but you don't want it on you. You can wear gloves too, but you can get a little bit of grease here. So now we're going to take our output stage, and it's very similar. It's going to have that spline to match up there, and has a rotating section on the outside. So we're going to kind of hold this still, bring these together, and then we're just going to rotate it until it finds its spot, a little bit of jiggle, and then rotate it until it kind of sits in place. Now, we have to keep this stack together. You can always hold it up vertically, which will help gravity will help you out there. And we can now take our 6 30mm long screws, and I'm just going to go ahead and set these in place in all of the holes. And they actually go all the way through until they hit that motor mounting bracket. And we're going to get them all in there. And once they're all in, we're going to take our 2.5mm wrench and start tightening them up. Now, it's really key with the Ultra Planetary never to over tighten these. And I'm actually going to just do it until it's just loose, essentially. It's just snugged up. You really don't want this too tight. What can happen is if you do this too tight, you can actually compress the gearbox a little too much, and it will bind up. So if your motor ever is feeling almost like sticky, or it's really not wanting to rotate, it's fighting too hard, you can find that loosening these slightly, I like to go through, loosen them all a little bit, and then re-snug them all. And you just want it tight enough to be held together, but not too tight that you're smashing all the gear stages and components together. So we're just going to go until all of these are not loose, but not necessarily tight. It can be a good idea to do a star pattern on these. So starting with this one, then go to this one, then this one, then this one, this one, this one, however you want to do it, but basically go to the opposite side, but it's not too tight as it's going to bind everything up. All right, we're going to continue with our Ultra Planetary assembly for the kit bot. So we have our preloaded bent Ultra Planetary bracket here. We have a 45 tooth gear, as well as 16mm long hex cap screws. So these little bit longer ones to go through the gear into the output of the Ultra Planetary. We're going to need 5 screws for mounting this bracket onto the Ultra Planetary, but let's get going. So I do like to try and keep the labeling facing up, and so we want to basically put it onto the bracket like this, so that way we can easily read this and see what's on it, and if we want to try and make changes, because you always can change the reduction on your drive through this method. So we're going to have the bent preloaded pieces towards the inside, towards the Ultra Planetary gearbox. We're going to line it up so that the lettering's on top, and we're going to take our 8mm long hex cap screws, and I'm just going to do the top hole here, and I'm just going to get that top hole lined up and started, and then once I have that started, I can then go through to the others and get those started. And I'm basically going to put all the screws in and start them, and then I can come back in and tighten them. And the gearbox can be in any orientation you want, as long as it's within these mounting holes. So you do have a couple of different orientations you can utilize. And that might come into play with wiring later in cable management, up to you. So I'm going to just get these from being loose. And once they start to tighten up, what we'll do is we'll do a bit of a star pattern. So we're going to tighten this one a little bit. We're going to go to one either on the opposite side or as close to the opposite side as possible. Come back over here and tighten this one up. Come back over here and tighten this one up. And then come back over here and tighten this last one up. And then we can just kind of check them. And so the next step is to take our 45 tooth gear. And it has a little bit of a boss on there, right? A little sticking out nub there. And that nub will fall into the pocket that's on the Ultraplanetary. So, but the thing you will want to notice is that there's a bit of a dead spot here on the output. That's intended for a set screw to go in here if you happen to use a different shaft method, etc. So we want to take note of this, and we're going to use 3 screws for mounting this. So we're going to use the top one completely opposite of the dead space and the 2 on the sides. And so that'll be the 3 16mm screws we're going to use. So keeping this in mind where those are, I'm going to place this gear approximately lined up. I'm going to take one of our 16mm screws and go to the top hole and place it in there and get a little bit of wiggle as I go to tighten it. And it looks like I got it lined up pretty well. So we got that first one started. I'm going to take the next one, and again we're making a triangle here with the 3 screws. And the other one here, so we're avoiding that dead spot and we're getting all 3 in there. Now once they're started, I can take my nut driver and begin to bring them down. Before they get tight, I'm going to make sure they're all kind of getting the same spot. And then as I get these tight, I'm again going to kind of do a little bit on one, come to the next, and go to the next, and just kind of evenly tighten them down. Now with this little boss in the center, you will tend to notice that this nut driver gets a little tight in there. And so if you're having problems getting in here and getting it in and then tightening it down, what you can do is you can bring in your open-ended wrench and finish tightening with it. That way you're out of the way of that center section. So this one's pretty loose, and there we go. So it's on there, and I can even rotate it a little bit by hand. It's a little hard though because we do have a lot of reduction here, but that looks good. It looks nice and solid, and we now have our 2 motors ready to go into the next assembly stage. All right, we're going to continue with our external robot frame assembly, and we have our external cross members here, as well as our Ultraplanetary gearboxes that are on their brackets ready to go with the 45 tooth gear. So we're going to take one of these, and you're going to have the bearing pillow blocks facing down and your corner brackets essentially in or towards the motor, and we're just going to load this on the top. So again, the bearing blocks on the bottom and the internal brackets are on the motor side. And we're just going to bring this in and then make this bracket flush with the aluminum extrusion here. And we're just going to come in and snug these up. And you're definitely going to want to be able to move this later. Because there's slots, it can actually kind of go out, come in, as well as slide side to side until you've tightened it up. So for now, we're going to make it just even with the extrusion on both sides here. So flush here and flush here. And it definitely can move around a lot on you and slide out on you. But once we start to snug this up, it'll get a little easier. So I'm just going to line that up as best I can. And again, adjusting this later is totally okay. I'm just going to snug this up. These might need to be snugged a little more than normal, but again, you just want it to not be moving around on you because you will need to adjust the gear mesh later. Now this is effectively our right assembly. This is the front of the robot, or will be the front of the robot in our case. Of course, your robot might be different, but for this build guide, this will be our front, and this will be considered our right assembly. All right, we're going to do the same thing with the other one now, but instead we're doing it inversed. So again, our bearing blocks, bearing pillow blocks are down. Our internal brackets are in. And we're going to slide the motor on this side this time. And we're going to try to make this flush. And it can help to tighten these a little bit right before it starts locking in place on both of them. Then kind of move it as you need to get it about flush, and then tighten it down. And this will then be set for when we introduce our other gear, to then adjust these to where they really need to be to mesh correctly, because they will need to move. But for now, that's fine. And we have essentially our external robot assembly members done, and we can move on to the next step. So one of the big parts is bringing the motors, our drive motors, into our internal robot assembly. So we have our internal robot assembly here, and we have our right and left external motor assemblies here. So we are actually going to be placing them approximately like this. So we're going to take these preloaded brackets here. They're going to slide into the sides here, as well as over here. And it's a good idea to kind of do these evenly. And just line it up a little bit. And again, bringing the tool in to rotate this nut a little bit. I'm going to back it off, rotate it, align it up, and then I can push it in. And I just want to be doing both sides evenly. So I'm making sure this side's also going in. It's also kind of caught on the second one. So I'm going to bring my tool up in, back it out a little bit, rotate it, and then start it. And bring another one. Looks like this one's stuck. So again, it's just about bringing these in evenly. And once they're both in there, we can slide it. And if for some reason you need to loosen any of these, you can. And you might just have to flex these ever so slightly out, and just to get everything lined up. And then we want to make it flush here. So these two aluminum ends are flush. And that'll help with squaring everything up. And you'll notice that it's not perfect, so we can go through and fix this later. But for now, we're just going to lightly snug this up so it's in place. And again, I'm going to bring this flush and then tighten this down just snug. And then one trick we can do is, since we have these flush now, and these essentially should be about 90 degrees, we can look at our gaps on either side here, and it looks like this gap is a little larger than this gap. So one trick I could do is loosen these a little bit more and let that kind of slide down so they're a little closer to even the gap, and then re-snug them. And we can come back and adjust again later. So we're going to do the other side. So this is our left motor assembly. This is our right motor assembly. So I'm going to take the right motor assembly and bring it in. And again, you have to kind of do this evenly. And ooh, got lucky on that one. Going to use my finger to kind of hold the nut and rotate it a little bit. And if that's not working, you can bring the tool in to do it. And there we go. Keep sliding it in. This internal one's not cooperating, so we're going to back it off, rotate it with the tool, slide it in, and that's good. This side, we're bringing it in together. We're also going to use the tool for this one, back it out a little bit, rotate it and hold it. Oh, and there we go. And then we're just, now with both of all four nuts are in place, it should be pretty easy to slide in. And good. So now I'm going to flip it over here. I'm going to make sure that these edges are about flush, using the feeling of my finger here a little bit, but I'm just going to snug these nuts up. Not too tight, but just snug. Make sure, same on this side. So those are snug. We can check our spacing here a little bit. Again, the spacing's a little bit larger, so I could loosen all 4 technically, but I'm just gonna loosen this one a little bit and let it kind of float and see if it's making about the same gap, and then snugging it back up. And I can again do this for the entire thing, but it's pretty close and it's looking pretty good. So there is essentially the external robot frame assembly complete.